For Stadio, a qualification isn't just a qualification. It's more students inspired to reimagine their possibilities. With 5 faculties, 10 campuses and over 50 accredited qualifications, undergraduate and postgraduate studies, contact, distance and blended learning, we're transforming higher education into something that's truly multi-faculty, multi-campus and multi-mode. Stadio, a new vision in higher education.
Our third episode, how to plan your kids' career, Bart. Some may think it's a stupid question, but explain to us what the new situation in South Africa is if you sign a contract at a franchise.
Carl, the viewpoint on changing the criteria, or not criteria, the legalities in junior contracts is not inherently a bad one. It is for a good reason, but it's a very, very limiting situation that we have now. So the new guidelines now is that when a junior player signs his first professional contract, the union that he's signed to has got the sole preference or right to keep him for 3 years, irrespective whether they sign him for 1 year or 2 years, or then obviously they can sign him for 3 years from the scratch. But now you can imagine that if I have a handle on a youngster now for at least 3 years, so his home union or where he has signed his first contract will have the preferential contracting opportunity of this youngster. So I will unlikely sign him for 3 years. I'll sign him for 1 year because I know that I've got the legal handle to keep him for another 2 years if I wanted to do so. So that's the one thing. The other thing is that if he's only signed for 1 or for 2 seasons and his contract ends with where he has signed for the first time, he will still be limited to stay local in South Africa and will have to make himself available if the regional union doesn't want to keep him. Any other South African union has got the option to contract that player for the remainder of the 3 years. So if he has been contracted for 1 year to the Lions does not extend his contract after the first year, another franchise in South Africa will have preferential contracting opportunity to sign him for the second and or the third year before he is allowed to leave for abroad. So not that everyone thinks and believes that every junior can sign abroad, but that is definitely a limiting factor, which actually gives the contracting power back to the unions. And I think it's a little bit one-sided. Again, like I say, I think it's for a good reason, because obviously this was pushed through from SARU's side to keep very talented youngsters in South Africa so that we don't lose them at an early stage. But it's one-sided in the sense that irrespective of what happens to this youngster now, he's probably going to be bound for 3 years. And if things doesn't work out for him in a South African union, that might be to his detriment going forward after his first or second contract.
Let's say he's contracted at the Lions and the Lions doesn't extend his contract. So for the next 2 years, SVD or the Leopards or anybody can approach him and sign a contract with him.
A local South African franchise, yes.
Will he be forced to accept a contract?
He cannot say no. So the only guideline is that he should not be worse off than the contract that he had. So if he signed at the Lions for 5,000 Rand a month and the Lions doesn't want to keep him, and another local franchise wants to contract him, it should be for the same amount or more. So they can't come and offer him less. So in that scenario, if he is not offered any extension by his original union, or any other local franchise wants to take him over, they've got to at least offer him what he has earned at his original union. Otherwise, he does not have to accept it.
But then he will be inactive. He won't be seen on the rugby fields or anything, unless Saru and the Lions release him of the contract. Yeah.
If he is not bound by the agreement legally and within the terms, then he's obviously allowed to leave. So, but your problem then obviously would be, why hasn't his contract been extended? So, going into a second or a third year, that in itself might be a negative reflection. It might be because of the fact that he's not played a lot in the season or 2 seasons that he spent as a junior at that particular union. So that would definitely have influenced his profile as a player negatively. So that, if he had the opportunity to go somewhere after school or after the first year, that profile of his might now have taken a bit of a dent, because any other options would question why he hasn't played. Is he not good enough? Was he injured? Whatever the case might be.
Okay. There's only how many under 20 teams in South Africa? There's the Bulls, the Sharks, the Lions, Western Province, Cheetahs, Leopards,
and probably Eastern Province, I think, will be included in that.
Maybe Eastern Province. So there's only 7 unions that contract under 20 players. Jeepers Bart, I don't think I'll let my kid be contracted in South Africa. Rather get him a proper university sponsorship deal or whatever, and send them to the universities to go and develop. Because if you look at the developing of players of under 20, I foresee in the next year or 2, unless Saru wakes up or somebody walks into the wall or somebody slams a door in somebody's face, nothing is going to change much. So the development of the under 20s is going to disappear. And then to be contracted or contractually bonded to South Africa for the next 3 years, stupid.
Carl, the main problem here is if you are not involved in, for example, a varsity cup structure where you can count on a measure of rugby that you can play and where you can get some rugby development. If you're only contracted to a union and limited to stay with the union, you're only going to get opportunity in the under 20 competition. So your main problem now is, now we're sitting with a junior group of school leavers that's been contracted. Obviously, the union will definitely make sure that they retain some of the 20-year-olds for 2 very good reasons. Those 20-year-olds, 1 year older, 1 year in the professional system, they are supposed to be the next guys in line that can promote into the senior structures. And obviously, if you go and play in a junior competition, you would want to win it. We're not going to play there just for the sake of it. It's a national competition. Like you've seen with especially the bigger unions really chasing the opportunity to be successful there. So they're going to retain as many under 20s as they can. So how many of the 19-year-olds are going to play? How many of them are going to get opportunity to play? And if you don't get exposure in the national competition, after a full year, again, like I'm saying, what happens to your profile as a player? What happens to your confidence? What happens to you developing as a player? Just holding bags for the older players, it's not going to be good enough. And therefore, I agree 100% with you. if it's possible for a player to get into a study situation, and again, then there's probably less than 50% of our youngsters leaving school that can go and study at the university, that's got the option, qualifies, gets exemption, and also at the same time be a professional player, because that's where you want to be. But that group now shrinks drastically in terms of numbers.
And Bart, if I have it right, the only measurement that restricts the unions when it comes to contracting junior players is the total amount of what they can spend. That's 10 million. But he can divide that 10 million into 100 players if he wishes to.
Yep, that's that creates a new problem for us. So in the past, you had quite strong competition for, let's say, the top 50 players in South Africa, if not more. So unions would really push each other's hands and pay relatively good contracts for junior players. Now, because of the new contracting model, they know that players don't have options. If I don't go to a university, I will rate myself as one of the lucky few to get a junior contract. So what happens now is the value of contracts are drastically reduced, which is good. I hate to see the time that we had in South Africa where anything between 400,000 and R1 million is offered for school leavers, because that has happened in South Africa in the past 5, 6, 7 years. But now unions abuse the fact that I've got 10 million, so now players will sign, because they're desperate, they will sign with me, but now they really pay them on the breadline. So that opens up the opportunity to keep the numbers high. So you can still contract 30 or 40 players and stay within your capping. There's no individual capping. The only individual capping that you have is a minimum that they are allowed to be paid. But I mean, that minimum is so low that you can really still contract numbers, which is very, very soon got to be revised by SARU. Is you cannot allow a union to contract 30, 35, 40 school leavers, because not half of them will be getting exposure in the under 20 competition.
But we know, I mean, the Lions in the Western Province and the Sharks refused to give me their names or their numbers on everything. The Bulls released a group of 30 players, and since then 8 to 10 new players added to that. So the Bulls should stand more or less at 40 players. So the Bulls are back to contracting the whole world and that. And if you're one of 30 or one of 40 players, the chance that you will be contracted for the next year will not be that good, because they must make allowance for the under 19s to come in. So 50% of the players will sit after 1 year without a contract, and then is forced to stay in South Africa.
Yeah, Carl, so your problem is three-way. Firstly, being contracted as a 19-year-old might give you very limited playing opportunity. So, like you say, after a year, you might be in a position that even if the union doesn't want to contract you anymore, no one else is going to look at you because you haven't played a lot.
Because it's limited, because you've got 7 unions that actually will play under 20 rugby.
Exactly. And then already we have seen, and now we all know that COVID has played its part again, influencing the situation. But if everything went on as planned, we would have had Varsity Cup at least for the players studying. So what has happened now is that with the 19-year-olds being contracted, they've been told that they're unlikely to be made available for Varsity Cup. We make that call, we pay your money, so we're not going to make you available. So the direct effect of that would be that the universities now will be very reluctant to offer a junior contracted player a bursary to come and study. So double negative. These players now would say, well, then I'm not going to study because I have to focus on my junior contract to retain that, and I cannot have any deviations from my plan, and studies will make it difficult for me. And in any case, if I want to study, I have to pay for my own studies.
But if you leave the Bulls after a year, or the Lions or the Sharks or whatever, after a year, and you want to go to and study at a university, and Gatsaran Union decides they want to contract you, you're forced to go to that union. You can't go and study.
That's exactly your problem. So studies in the new contracting model now suddenly become secondary or sort of invaluable again. Something that we really jacked up, I believe, over the last 4, 5, 6 seasons in South Africa. We, if I say we, between the unions and the universities, managed to get the value of studies at a higher level and make sure that we get as many juniors to enter into studies and they get opportunities to play. So now universities will have the viewpoint of, I'm going to give a bursary to a player that's going to play for us. So I'm not going to give a bursary to a junior contracted player. So immediately you take that opportunity away. And that's going to happen in the second year as well. So you become redundant at the union. You might not get any playing time anywhere. So the big thing here is, again, the right hand and the left hand knows nothing of each other. So we're not talking to each other. We're not planning together. We've just told players that you're not going to be available for Varsity Cup rugby, and the universities are operating on their own and making sure that they've got their provision sorted in terms of bursaries and players. And the real sufferers in the whole process is our junior players. And that's what I'm saying is our structures are really not providing for development of our juniors at this stage in South Africa, not at national level. And now that you've got the situation that the Junior World Cup does not exist for now, in any case, we don't know for how long, that value add of development at that level will definitely also be diluted. So SARU is not going to push any money into it. The unions are definitely going to start reducing the effort and the money and the time they put into juniors. Where do we go to, and how do we get this juniors of ours to the next level?
Just to answer one question, I think the left hand is scratching the bum and is doing real proper inspection, and the right hand is picking the nose. So that's what's happening in South Africa now. But to sum the whole situation up, Bart, the first prize will be a proper contract at a union overseas where there's proper development, because I mean, that's where you're going to get developed as a junior player. 10 times better than what you're going to be developed in South Africa. So that will be your first prize. Your second prize will be a contract at a union, and your third prize, a bursary at the university.
It's got to be part of, as we said in previous week's call, it's got to be part of a proper future planning phase for each and every youngster. So parents have got to look at what is happening in the industry out there. What is the situation with junior contracting models? Again, we're not just propagating players to move abroad, but ironically, there are currently very good and more opportunities, and I'm talking about structured opportunities for youngsters in South Africa being taken into formal provincial and national academies of countries out there than we have in South Africa. And then they're not even looked at in the South African academy context. So that worries me, which tells me we are spoiled rotten in terms of talent in South Africa. And at the moment, we are just rolling forward with the fact that we'll just get the cream again, and we'll get them together and we'll take that cream, and at some point we'll work with them. There's no development of your number 2s, 3s and 4s in the system that actually needs to carry rugby in South Africa.
Well, Bart, I personally see more of our number one players going overseas. Because, I mean, these players also know that Jake White and all the other coaches are looking more at overseas players at the age of 25 or 24, 25, than they will look at a 20-year-old looking to develop them.
Unfortunately, that is the tendency at the moment. We're seeing, especially with what seems a very positive sort of happening with the four so-called big unions now having the European excursions and opportunity to go and play there. That is very positive. We've said that over and over. The problem is, what do we do to get the next level of players through? Because right now, everyone under the covers of we must get European experienced players back into the mix, they are just flocking back to South Africa and they're plugging the holes for young players that could potentially come through and do their thing. Who am I? If I had a say in this as a CEO or a high performance manager of any of these unions, I would really have sat down and said, listen, 20% of my player allocation has got to be development orientated. We're signing a contract, but everyone heads to Europe now with the intention of going there and being successful and to win. And unfortunately, that is the overboard inclination, which I don't agree with. You've got to have a structured part of your whole plan has got to be development orientated, and that's not the case.
All right, so for anybody wishing for Bart to become a CEO at a big union, now you know why he won't be appointed as the CEO. Interesting, Bart. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Interesting times, like you say. Maybe negative, but I think there's opportunities just to look at it differently. And I really hope that SARU, in combination with our big unions, get together around the table, because there's been no discussions in terms of development of our youngsters and anything. We just want something. We just want something to tell us that our youngsters are being looked at, and there's nothing at the moment.
Right, that's our English version of that. I think, Bart, to get more attention from SARU, we'll have to start speaking Xhosa and I almost said coloured, but yeah, that's also a form of Afrikaans. Yeah, nothing we can do. Thanks a lot.